The 1967 movie turned two Great Depression-era killers into romantic icons of rebellion. The reality is dirtier, more violent, and much sadder. Subscribe, because in this video, we debunk the myth of Bonnie and Clyde, fact by fact. Number 1. Clyde Barrow wasn't after money. What he wanted was to settle the score with the system. Clyde grew up in the poorest part of West Dallas, Texas, where they had almost nothing. While he was still young, he ended up at Eastham Prison Farm, a place known for its brutality. Inside, he suffered abuse that stayed with him for the rest of his life. People who knew Clyde after that said he came out a different man. His anger wasn't just aimed at one guard or another inmate. It was aimed at the entire state, the laws, and the way that system treated poor people. His own family said his obsession wasn't getting rich. It was getting revenge on the Texas prison system. Every robbery, every escape, every gunshot carried that history behind it. Years later, he even helped with a plan to break into Eastham and free prisoners. It wasn't greed. It was bottled-up hatred, waiting for the chance to make them pay for everything they had done to him. Number 2. Bonnie wrote poetry between serving one plate and the next. Before becoming the most wanted name in the country, Bonnie Parker was just a young woman from Texas with a notebook full of poems. At school, no one could beat her. She won writing and public speaking contests, and everyone thought she was going places. And she did, just not in the way they imagined. She got married at 16 to a young man who soon ended up behind bars. She was left alone, still wearing her wedding ring, and started waiting tables at a small cafe in Dallas, continuing to scribble poems in her spare time. It was there, on a cold morning in 1930, that she crossed paths with Clyde Barrow. And the rest became history. But the chilling detail came later. In a poem called The Trail's End, Bonnie described in no uncertain terms how the two of them would end up, hunted down, cornered, and killed side by side with no chance of escape. She wrote it before it happened, and that was exactly how the end came. Number 3. Clyde Barrow cut off 2 of his own toes in prison. It was 1932. Clyde was serving time at Eastham Prison Farm in Texas, one of the toughest places in the entire American prison system. Work in the fields started before sunrise, the guards showed no mercy, and every day there seemed endless. That was when Clyde made a decision that would leave anyone speechless. With the help of another inmate and an axe, he had 2 of his own toes chopped off. The logic was simple. A crippled man was no good for forced labor. He would rather lose part of his body than endure one more day of that routine. But life saved its cruelest blow for last. Just a few days later, he was granted parole. Had he waited a little longer, he would have left prison with his foot intact. Clyde walked with a limp for the rest of his life, and from then on, he often drove barefoot so he could feel the pedals better. Number 4. A lot of people picture Bonnie and Clyde blowing open the vaults of major banks. The truth is very different. During the Great Depression, the so-called Barrow Gang actually made a living from small-time robberies, roadside grocery stores, gas stations, and little shops in small towns. In many of their jobs, they got away with only a few dozen dollars in their pockets. Real bank robberies were the exception, not the norm. What made their names famous wasn't the money they stole, but the violence and their endless escape across rural Texas and neighboring states. They drove stolen cars, slept outdoors, and traded gunfire with the police along the way. While newspapers portrayed the pair as major criminals, the reality was a string of petty robberies that barely paid for gas and food for the day. In the end, they died young, ambushed on a road in Louisiana in 1934. The legend became much bigger than any vault they ever opened. Number 5. They mainly killed police officers. A lot of people picture Bonnie and Clyde as a romantic couple jumping from bank to bank across rural America. The truth is much darker. The Barrow gang left around 9 police officers dead between 1932 and 1934, not counting the civilians who crossed their path at the wrong place and the wrong time. And here's the detail almost no one talks about. Most of those deaths didn't come from movie-style face-to-face shootouts. They came from ambushes. The group would be cornered on a dirt road, at a gas station, or in a hideout, and they would respond by shooting first. When an officer walked up to check out a parked car, it was often already too late. There was nothing heroic about it. They were cornered people, armed to the teeth, willing to kill to avoid going back to prison. Every escape cost a life, and it was almost always that of a man in uniform who was just doing his job that morning. Number 6. The Grapevine Massacre. It was Easter Sunday, April 1st, 1934. Near the small town of Grapevine, Texas, 2 young highway patrolmen spotted a car parked on the side of the road. They thought it was just a driver who needed help and approached without suspecting a thing. One of them, H.D. Murphy, was only 24 years old and just days away from getting married. It was one of his first days on the job. When they got close, Bonnie and Clyde's gang opened fire. The 2 young men fell right there before they could even draw their guns. Until that day, many people still saw the couple as a kind of hero, people who robbed banks at a time when banks were taking working people's homes. But killing 2 officers so young on Easter Sunday changed everything. Sympathy turned into hatred, and the entire country began wanting that couple either behind bars or 6 feet under. Number 7. The cigar photo that created the legend. In April 1933, Bonnie and Clyde were hiding out in an apartment in Joplin, Missouri. The police surrounded the building, a shootout broke out, 2 officers were killed, and the gang made a run for it. In the rush, they left almost everything behind, including a roll of film that had never been developed. The officers had the film developed, and that was when everything changed. Before that, hardly anyone in the country knew what the couple looked like. In one of the photos, Bonnie was holding a revolver with a thick cigar in her mouth. The local newspaper published it, papers across the country copied it, and overnight, that young woman became the face of crime in America. But there's one thing almost no one knows. Bonnie didn't smoke cigars. She smoked Camel cigarettes. The cigar was just a joke for the picture. The country believed it, she hated it, and her joke ended up becoming a national legend. Number 8. Bonnie was left disabled after a car accident. Few people know this, but Bonnie Parker spent the last months of her life barely able to stand. On June 10, 1933, near Wellington, Texas, Clyde was behind the wheel and didn't see the signs warning that a bridge was under construction. The car plunged down an embankment by the river and rolled over. During the crash, the gas tank caught fire and battery acid leaked out, badly burning her right leg, the kind of burns that leave scars for the rest of your life. After that, nothing was ever the same. Her leg was partially paralyzed and Bonnie limped everywhere. She often couldn't even walk on her own, and Clyde had to carry her in his arms from place to place. When the 2 were caught in the ambush in May 1934, she was still dragging that injured leg. The accident that nearly killed her ended up becoming part of the Bonnie and Clyde legend to this day. Number 9. The Eastham Prison Break. This is where the story gets personal. Before becoming a famous outlaw, Clyde had served time at Eastham Prison Farm in Texas, and he left there full of hatred for the system. He swore he would come back, and he did. On January 16, 1934, with guns hidden inside the prison farm the day before, Clyde organized a rescue and helped several inmates escape, including his old partner Raymond Hamilton and Henry Methvin. In the middle of the chaos, a guard was shot and later died. That was when everything changed. The escape was a slap in the face to Texas authorities, and Lee Simmons, the head of the prison system, wasn't going to let it go. He hired Frank Hamer, a tough former Texas Ranger with one goal: hunt down Bonnie and Clyde and put an end to it once and for all. Without realizing it, Clyde had signed his own death warrant. That rescue put the man on their trail who, months later, would set up the ambush that killed them both. Number 10. Frank Hamer, the Ranger who never gave up. While the couple was becoming a legend in the newspapers, a quiet man was getting ready to put an end to it. In February 1934, Frank Hamer, a former Texas Ranger who had already been through dozens of shootouts, was called back into service with one mission: catch Bonnie and Clyde, no matter what it took. But Hamer didn't just go around shooting. He studied the couple the way someone studies a map. He noticed that they always traveled the same route, returning to visit their families on certain dates. He spent nearly 4 months on their trail, sleeping in his car and predicting their every move. On May 23rd, he and 5 other men set up an ambush on a road in Louisiana. Within seconds, it was all over. The strangest part came later. In 1967, a Hollywood movie portrayed Hamer as a fool who had been humiliated by the gang, something that never happened. His family didn't let it slide, took the matter to court, and won. Number 11. The Final Ambush and the Hail of Bullets. On the morning of May 23, 1934, on a dirt road near Gibbsland, Louisiana, 6 lawmen waited hidden in the bushes. Led by former Texas Ranger Frank Hamer, who had been hired solely to capture the pair, they had been hunting the couple for weeks. When Clyde's stolen Ford V8 came around the bend, the men gave no warning and no chance to surrender. At the first signal, they all opened fire at once. In just a few seconds, more than 130 bullets tore through the car's body. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow died almost instantly, without even having time to draw the guns they carried beside them. The gunfire was so intense that the officers had to wait for the smoke to clear before approaching. The bullet-riddled car became a gruesome attraction, and people from all over the country paid just to take a look. That was how the escape of the most famous outlaw couple in American history came to an end. Number 12. Few people know this, but the car Bonnie and Clyde died in still exists, with every mark from that ambush still in place. It was a 1934 Ford V8, stolen from a homemaker in Kansas just a few weeks before the end. At the time, the couple was the most wanted in the country. On the morning of May 23, 1934, on a dirt road in Louisiana, 6 lawmen, led by former Texas Ranger Frank Hamer, set up an ambush. When the Ford appeared, more than 130 shots rained down in just a few seconds, and the 2 died right there. The car came to a stop riddled with more than 160 bullet holes. Instead of being turned into scrap metal, that Ford went back on the road, only this time as an attraction. For decades, it traveled to fairs and amusement parks across the country, and people lined up and paid just to stick their fingers into the bullet holes. Today, that same Ford is on display at a casino in Primm, Nevada, exactly as it was left. And people still pay to see the holes that brought America's most famous escape to an end. Number 13. Crowds looted the crime scene. Just minutes after the shooting stopped, that dirt road in Louisiana turned into a full-blown circus. Word spread quickly across the area, and people from all over started showing up to see with their own eyes the Ford where Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow had just been killed. But no one came just to look. As soon as the bodies were removed from the car, the crowd rushed in. Men and women shoved each other, fighting over anything they could take home. Some people tried to cut locks of Bonnie's hair, still stained with blood. Others tore off pieces of her dress, buttons, and shards of glass shattered by the bullets. Some even tried to cut off a finger, just so they would have something to show their neighbors later. The coroner who arrived at the scene could barely believe what he was seeing. Alone, he tried to hold the crowd back, but the frenzy for a souvenir was stronger. It took quite a while before order was finally restored. Number 14. They weren't buried together. In life, Bonnie and Clyde were inseparable. They traveled the country side by side, robbed banks side by side, and in May 1934 died side by side in the same ambush on a road in Louisiana. After all that, you'd think they would stay together forever. That's not what happened. Bonnie made it clear that she wanted to be buried near Clyde, but her family never accepted that relationship. Bonnie's mother said no, and she didn't change her mind. As far as she was concerned, Clyde had already dragged her daughter too far away in life. She wasn't going to allow it in death, too. In the end, they each went their separate ways. Clyde was buried at Western Heights Cemetery, next to his brother. Bonnie was laid to rest a few miles away at Crown Hill. Both graves are still in Dallas today, separated by a few streets. The couple who became legendary for never being apart ended up separated by just a few city blocks. Number 15. The myth was born on the big screen, not in real life. A lot of people grew up believing Bonnie and Clyde were rebellious heroes, a charming couple who only wanted to take on the banks. But that image didn't come from the dirt roads of 1930s Texas. It came straight from Hollywood. In 1967, the movie starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway turned the two into symbols of freedom, right in the middle of the American counterculture. Young people at the time saw themselves in that couple who challenged the system, and that was when the legend truly caught fire. What almost no one talks about is that while they were alive, Bonnie and Clyde weren't admired. They were feared, and, as time went on, increasingly hated. Every robbery and every police officer killed made headlines and outraged the entire country. The couple that the movies portrayed as romantic left behind a trail of blood that the public at the time could never forgive. Number 16. Dexfield Park, where the gang was torn apart and Buck Barrow died. Number 16. Dexfield Park, the place where the Barrow gang truly began to fall apart. It was July 24, 1933. Near the town of Dexter, Iowa, more than 100 armed men, including police officers and local residents, surrounded a small campsite in the woods. Inside was Bonnie and Clyde's gang, exhausted and wounded. Buck Barrow, Clyde's older brother, already had a bullet lodged in his head from a shootout days earlier in Platte City, Missouri. With nowhere to run, he was shot again and captured. 5 days later, he died at a hospital in the town of Perry. His wife, Blanche, was arrested with shards of glass embedded in her face. She lost sight in one eye and was still sentenced to 10 years in prison. In the end, only Bonnie, Clyde, and the young W.D. Jones escaped, on foot, deep into the woods. What Hollywood almost never tells you is that this famous gang was actually a family slowly being torn apart. Number 17. W.D. Jones, the kid who said he was practically a prisoner. Imagine being 16 years old and going down in history as one of Clyde Barrow's accomplices at Christmas. That's what happened to William Daniel Jones at the end of 1932. Decades later, in a 1968 interview with Playboy magazine, he came out with a version no one expected. He said those months with the gang were a never-ending nightmare, and that they sometimes chained him to the car so he couldn't run away. The truth, or an excuse from someone who got caught? No one ever knew for sure. What is known is that he took part in robberies, traded gunfire, was shot more than once, and was eventually arrested in Houston in November 1933. He served his sentence, got out, and lived for more than 40 more years. The end of the story? He was shot to death in Houston in 1974. The tough accomplice shown in the movies was, in real life, nothing more than a scared young man who just wanted to go home. Number 18. Raymond Hamilton, the partner who became an enemy and ended up in the electric chair. In the early days of the gang, in 1932, Raymond Hamilton rode alongside Clyde Barrow. But the friendship didn't last. The two had a bitter falling out over money and women, and Clyde showed no mercy. He wrote a public letter mocking him in front of everyone. Humiliated, Hamilton kept robbing on his own. It didn't last long. The police arrested him. He managed to escape death row, but he was caught again. On May 10, 1935, almost a year after Bonnie and Clyde were killed on the road, he was taken to the old electric chair nicknamed Old Sparky at Huntsville Prison in Texas. He was only 21 when the switch was thrown. And here's what almost no one talks about. That image of a close-knit gang was nothing but a front. Behind the scenes, Bonnie and Clyde's group was full of betrayal, jealousy, and rivalries that ended in death. Number 19, the Joplin shootout and the roll of film that became a legend. On April 13, 1933, police surrounded an apartment at the corner of 34th Street and Oak Ridge Drive in Joplin, Missouri. They thought the people living there were selling bootleg liquor, which was common at the time. They had no idea who was inside. As soon as they approached, the shooting started. Detective Harry McGinnis and Officer Wes Harriman were killed, and the gang escaped through the back, leaving almost everything behind. In the middle of the chaos, the officers found a camera with an undeveloped roll of film inside. When they developed it, they were stunned. The pictures showed Bonnie and Clyde posing and smiling with guns in their hands and a stolen car in the background. Bonnie even appeared with a cigar between her teeth. The newspapers published everything, and overnight, two nearly unknown robbers became the most famous criminals in the country. Number 20. The ambush was bought through the betrayal of the Methvin family. Bonnie and Clyde's deaths didn't come from some brilliant investigation. They came from a deal made behind closed doors. Henry Methvin was one of the younger members of the gang, and his father, Ivy Methvin, would do anything to get his son out of the line of fire. That was when Louisiana authorities stepped in. They offered Henry a pardon in exchange for helping set up the trap. On May 23, 1934, on a dirt road near Gibbsland, Louisiana, old Ivy's truck was left parked as if it had broken down. It was the bait. When Clyde stopped to see what had happened, the lawmen hiding in the bushes opened fire. It lasted only a few seconds. And here's what's most shocking. The two most wanted criminals in the country didn't go down in a chase. They went down because someone on the inside, people who claimed to be their friends, handed them over on a silver platter. Number 21. In April 1934, just a few weeks before dying in an ambush, Clyde Barrow reportedly did something hard to believe. He sat down, picked up a pen, and wrote a personal letter to none other than Henry Ford. And it wasn't a threat. It was a thank you note. Signed Clyde Champion Barrow, the letter praised the Ford V8 and said he only drove Fords when he needed to make a getaway. That came from one of the most wanted men in the country. And it made sense. The gang always stole Ford V8s because no police car could keep up with that engine. In a twist of fate, Bonnie and Clyde ended up dying inside a stolen 1934 Ford V8 Deluxe, riddled with bullets on a road in Louisiana. To this day, historians still debate whether the letter was real. But one thing no one denies. Without meaning to, an outlaw turned the car he stole into the best advertising Ford ever had.